Back in November 2001, Microsoft jumped into the console market and released one of the best consoles of all time, the original Xbox. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the original Xbox was one console that basically came out of nowhere from the grasps of one of the biggest companies in the world to basically infiltrate a market dominated by the Japanese, Nintendo and PlayStation. And you know what they did? They won. They succeeded. They actually cracked into one of the most competitive markets imaginable. Now, when I talk about the original Xbox, I'm talking about the system that had the very, very amazing green, kind of cyberpunky style whenever you
Yes, it did. That was an amazing feat by Microsoft that still to this day, I'm like, man, Microsoft really cracked the code and really got into the industry that thought no Western company could get into. Because back then there was only a bunch of Japanese companies in the industry, whether it be Sega, Nintendo, which Sega at the time went out. So I think when Xbox came in was right when Sega was leaving, so they needed a third competitor, but even still, so the industry was dominated by mostly Japanese competitors even before Microsoft came on the scene, like Sega, Nintendo, Sony, and all that. It was dominated by mostly Japanese companies. So when Microsoft was like, oh well, we're gonna make the third competitor as Sega left behind, people were like, Microsoft can't be a competitor in the game industry. There's no way they can create a console that can compete with both Sony and Nintendo. And they really did. They created a really good competitor against both Sony and Nintendo. I'll say the original Xbox was one of Microsoft's probably their first best console that ever released, just because the stuff you could do on it was ridiculous. And it even still has some of my most favorite games on, like Dead or Alive. The Dead or Alive series was for a long time exclusive to Microsoft after the PS2 era. The Dead or Alive series, which I'm a big Dead or Alive fan, it was exclusive to Microsoft after the PS2 era. Like Dead or Alive 5 and 4 were exclusive to Microsoft, and same with Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. That was exclusive to Microsoft. And this was like really, really cool at the time because Microsoft was making big moves in the video game industry and with certain Japanese companies. So yeah, that honestly, I would say Microsoft that they did succeed, and that's the reason they're still in the games industry in some form or fashion.
fired up that system, a console that came with some of the most beastly specifications at the time, hard drives, and popularized online centralized gaming, okay? It wasn't that
Yeah.
gaming didn't touch the internet. The PlayStation 2 was online, in some capacity. I'm pretty sure GameCube had a network adapter. Heck, Nintendo had online gaming with the Super Nintendo. And let's not get started on the Dreamcast, but the Xbox with Xbox Live allowed tons of people around the world, the country, to come together and play games like Halo 2 online. It popularized
Yep. It popular. Honestly, Microsoft popularized online. Honestly, Microsoft did. We wouldn't have to have the online systems today if it wasn't for Microsoft popularizing it. Microsoft set the foundation. Microsoft set it with the original Xbox and Xbox Live on the original Xbox. I remember so many people saying, "Oh, I'm playing Xbox Live on the original Xbox. I'm playing this on the original Xbox." The Xbox itself came with that internet built into it, whereas Sony had to buy an external adapter to do it, or even Nintendo. Whereas Microsoft came with it built into the original Xbox, and it came with something we today take for granted, hard drive. It came in with a built-in hard drive to it. Something that's nowadays in every gaming system, whether it's Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony. That's something that Microsoft that's had built in from the original console was a built-in data storage that you didn't need to go out and buy an external memory card, like say with the PS2 or GameCube. You could just save it to your actual, you could just save your data to your actual console itself, when something we take for granted nowadays. So yeah, that was something that Microsoft set for the industry that we do nowadays. So Yeah, Microsoft set a lot of industry standards we use nowadays.
Popularized an entire slew of gamers to be part of one of the most toxic online communities. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Gaming was like different back then, okay? It was like a different total time. People would line up to stores, pick up these games, pick up copies of Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, you name it, and just go home and play with the boys and the girls and everyone imaginable. Now, of course, while the original Xbox wasn't necessarily the biggest sales juggernaut, it was definitely a system that felt different to play. You know, if you played a game like Splinter Cell back in the day versus the PlayStation 2, which is where I initially played it, or the Xbox, the versions would literally be different because Microsoft released one of the most impressive gaming systems on the market, a system that genuinely felt amazing to play, a system that had graphics that would absolutely eclipse its competition. And you could feel it when you played it at a demo kiosk at a Best Buy or a Walmart, or you went to your friend's house and actually played a game that played at double the frame rate with enhanced graphical effects. It really felt different. Then, of course, Microsoft released one of my favorite consoles of all time, the Xbox 360. Now, the Xbox 360 is a system that I will never forget. It's a system where I loaded up Halo 3 for the first time, connected two controllers, and played Halo 3's campaign split screen with my brother. I played it over Xbox Live with my friends, and it brought me into a whole slew of console exclusives from Xbox that have such a profound impact on my gaming history. When I talk about games like Gears of War 1, 2, and 3, these are games that have carried me through high school. They have carried me through friendships, and they are games that I have fond memories of. When I think about games like Forza and Forza Horizon,
Yep, this is where Microsoft built up all their goodwill. Microsoft had some of the most amazing games during the 360 era. Some of their games Crackdown, the original Crackdown, Gears of War 2, Gears of War 3, Halo 3, Halo ODST, just all those games. They were all phenomenal in some form of way. Microsoft made really good games during the 360 era. And like I said, they even had games that were took a while to even come to Sony's platform. That were a while were exclusive to them from the Japanese market, such as Dead or Alive. A lot of the, like I said, the Dead or Alive games, which I'm a big fan of, which I was upset I didn't get to play during the 360 era. 'Cause I never really owned a 360. They were exclusive to Microsoft. Dead or Alive, both 3 and 4 were exclusive to Microsoft. They weren't on any other platform. They're exclusive to the 360, which was a big deal for the Dead or Alive franchise. And the Dead or Alive franchise beforehand was on multiple platforms. It went all of a sudden be exclusive to Microsoft till Dead or Alive 5 and 6. So yeah, this is a big. Microsoft made big moves during the 360 era.
when I think of Splinter Cell Conviction, and I think of numerous Xbox 360 games that stand the test of time, this was a gaming console that Microsoft released a year ahead of their competitor, and they absolutely got that killer advantage. And if you talk about any console that would solidify anyone's place in history, it would be the Xbox 360. But of course, all good things come to an fucking end, because Microsoft released what was in fact the Xbox One and revealed it with the worst possible thing imaginable. Price is Right was a core feature of that console generation, and in this moment, 10 years ago, Microsoft handed the reins of console leadership over to their competition immediately, when they would promote televisions and movies as the core feature offering, far more involved than video games. It was a system where this guy ended up actually ruining the Xbox brand by making dumbass statements like this.
On for games.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links games and entertainment, the functionality of the box, some of the advantages that you get of having a box that is designed to use an online state. So that, to me, is a future-proof choice, and I think people could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message. If you don't,
Well,
you don't like it.
if you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously.
Now, of course, this was the scummy response to when people rightfully were mad about Xbox One's forced online connectivity. But of course, times have changed, and I'm pretty sure the remaining Xbox crowd that still loves this console would probably defend this to this day. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, this was the turning point between Xbox being dominant and Xbox stagnating into the position it.
Yeah, that was the stinker that put Microsoft to have to rely on games as a service with Xbox Game Pass and stuff like that, because that was the decision that that guy got fired for, and where Phil Spencer filled in his spot. Was Phil Spencer had fixed a lot of the bad wheel Microsoft has had with his consumers. So that Phil Spencer has been a way different guy than he was. And I don't remember that guy's name, but that guy was a big stinker. Whereas Phil Spencer was like, yeah, I'm coming in and fixing this problem you made. Because that was a stupid decision that really almost ruined Microsoft. It almost made them to where they couldn't even have a console on the market, because you're like, oh, internet isn't fast in my region. And there was even parts of the United States where internet just wasn't up to speed, and that wasn't where it needed to be at. I remember back during that era where I have friends tell me, oh, they're in a rural area where their internet just isn't up to speed. It isn't up to the download speed where other city areas are, and they couldn't do the internet speed that say this person could do with their internet, and they're in a city area. So really, either in parts of the United States where the internet just wasn't up to speed, and the internet just wasn't there to play a game, play the system like the Xbox One. So that was just damaging goodwill all around, to where it was like, yeah, that's gonna ruin Microsoft. So they fired that guy, hired Phil Spencer, and Phil Spencer fixed that. I was like, look, we're not gonna have any online check shit. We're going to allow you to play it offline. We're going to fix that, and it's not going to be something you have to do this all DRM for. But still, that ruined Microsoft's goodwill to where they had to go to Xbox Game Pass in order to get that goodwill back.
It's in now. Now, the Xbox Series S and X are the current console offerings, and Microsoft isn't necessarily doing too well. In fact, they're actually going through a lot of layoffs. Now, before we continue into this, I want to say that layoffs are kind of happening all throughout the world right now. It's not just the gaming industry, it's the world in general. But may I remind you, Microsoft is one of the largest companies in the world. So this is Microsoft's current market cap, $3.057 trillion, making them larger than Apple, Nvidia, Google, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco. If any company has deep pockets, it is in fact Microsoft as a company. They don't just make crazy money on Xbox. In fact, Xbox used to just be a rounding error. In fact, it was a rounding error until effectively Microsoft ended up buying some of the biggest studios in the world. For instance, Microsoft bought Bethesda or ZeniMax for $7.5 billion. And this is an important metric to consider today. They bought this entire set of companies for $7.5 billion. In fact, they even bought Activision Blizzard for $75.4 billion US dollars, which effectively makes Microsoft a pretty serious blip for Microsoft's bean counters at this point, right? Remember, Xbox used to be a rounding error. They never really made a lot of money, nor did they lose enough money ever. It was just something that they had under their umbrella the entire time. And it was propped up by Microsoft's other ventures like Office, Teams, and of course, their Windows operating systems. See, Microsoft is in the business of subscription services. Nearly everything Microsoft offers is a subscription, whether you buy Windows or subscribe to Windows at this point, whether you subscribe to Office or Xbox Game Pass, you are in a plethora of subscription hell when it comes to this company. And that's pretty much the direction they feel they have to go. Now, of course, because Microsoft bought ZeniMax, people had thought, well, maybe the company is going to be propped up with that sweet, sweet Microsoft money. No, because Tango Gameworks, about a day ago, pretty much said, today it's announced that Tango Gameworks will close. Thank you for everyone that explored the worlds we created. Hi-Fi Rush, along with Tango's previous titles, will remain available and playable everywhere they are today. Now, it's actually kind of funny how...
Damn. Microsoft pretty much pissed on their goodwill with that. They shut down one of the biggest game studios, like one of their most successful games thus far. A lot of their games on the Xbox Series S and X have not been successful. They've been crappy games. They've been games that have not reviewed well. They've been games that just did not do well whatsoever. But then they shut down this studio that made one of the best games that got reviewed. Everybody loved the Hi-Fi Rush. Everybody enjoyed it. Even the people that were playing on PSN enjoyed Hi-Fi Rush. Even the people that were playing on PlayStation console enjoyed Hi-Fi Rush. And then Microsoft is like, yeah, we're just going to shut down that studio, and yeah, we're just going to piss in the goodwill of our consumers. I mean, this is a classic Microsoft, a classic game industry. This game industry right now making decisions that are just not smart whatsoever. Just shitting on goodwill, crapping on things, and making things worse than what they should be.
During the same day, the other Microsoft marketing division ended up releasing a controller that said, "Feel the burn today." Now, I don't want to shit on anybody in the marketing sphere because these departments oftentimes have no idea what the hell is going on. I just thought it was a hilarious coincidence. That said, though, one of Microsoft's acquisitions, one of their most prized acquisitions, and one they absolutely praised, ended up being shuttered down. Now, to give you an idea, this information cut so deep for me, and it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. One of my favorite games that Tango Gameworks has ever made is Ghostwire Tokyo, a game that I absolutely poured my hours into, 100%ed, and absolutely loved. It's not a game that is super impressive by any metrics, but it's a game that allows you to explore the supernatural version of Tokyo where everything has disappeared, and it deeply goes into Japanese folklore where you're fighting yokais, and there's side quests, there's a campaign, there's just a whole lot of exploration, and it's one of those games you kind of play when you want to almost turn your brain off and just do a whole bunch of checklisty stuff. In some way, this game feels like an original Xbox 360 title from that era, but brought up just enough so that it actually melds with current modern day AAA standards. And now, this game probably didn't do so well, but it did end up getting free updates down the road too, where they ended up adding a roguelike mode, which is actually really awesome, and of course, new features and whatnot. Now, Tango Gameworks also made the other franchise known as The Evil Within, which people really do enjoy, Evil Within 1 and 2. But one game franchise they absolutely have made that has blown people away is Hi-Fi Rush, which actually won awards and pretty much was one of the games that people had brought up as Microsoft's big wins of last year. Now, while I wasn't the biggest fan of Hi-Fi Rush, to give you an idea, Phil Spencer, the current acting boss from my understanding of Microsoft, had this shit to say a year ago on the Kinda Funny Games podcast.
But one thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. Then a lot of people will say, hey, you've got teams know how to do one kind of game, just force them to go do the one kind of game that they have a proven track record for. And I'm just not a believer in that. Maybe that means I'll underdeliver for some of our fans out there. But when a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango wants to go do Hi-Fi, when everybody probably thought they were doing Evil Within 3, I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability, push their aspirations.
So yeah, all this guy does is goddamn yap and not actually amount to anything. Microsoft even pretty much had went out, again, this was Aaron Greenberg, who actually ended up saying Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. So again, on one breath, they're talking about, again...
So one breath, they're talking about how Hi-Fi Rush is a great game. Then you sit down in the studio that made it. That makes no sense, Microsoft. What were you thinking with that? I mean, you could allow this team to make so many more games. So many more games like Hi-Fi Rush. So many more great products like that. And then you just go out there and cut them in the gut, shoot him in the head. It's like, you're dying today. You're never gonna make another game again. We'll take you out to the graveyard where you're gonna be put down forever.
Creatively fostering all of these companies they bought to succeed. And hey, this one game studio, Tango, had made a absolute breakout hit for us. And then of course, what do they do next? Shut the fucking studio down. And they didn't just shut this studio down. Microsoft announced 4 other studios being shut down as well. One of them was Arcane Austin as well. You know what Arcane Austin made, by the way, that was absolutely impressive? It was a game known as Prey. Now, Prey is, for anybody that's played System Shock or Bioshock, is an immersive sim game similar to that, where, again, it's an immersive shooter. If you played a game where there's a lot of, I guess, first-person style Metroidvania, where you got to keep backtracking, upgrade your abilities, fight against enemies, it is literally that game. It is an amazing title that, you know, was released. People didn't jump into it and buy it. It wasn't like a massive seller from my understanding. It wasn't like super huge, but it was a game that was critically acclaimed, well loved. And again, this studio had to be shut down because Microsoft is in a situation where I really feel like they have no idea what to actually do with their brand anymore. Ever since Microsoft bought some of the biggest companies in gaming and some of the biggest brands like Call of Duty, it's basically become a situation in Microsoft where they actually, I think, have no idea of what to promote for a lot of their games. Do they promote Halo? Do they promote Call of Duty? Do they promote any of these big brands? It's seriously confusing to be at Microsoft. Whereas Nintendo and Sony have like actual release schedules for a lot of these big games where they actually treat them pretty equally. For instance, if they're releasing God of War Ragnarok, they give that the same amount, from my understanding, of promotion and attention as when they release games that aren't necessarily as huge as Death Stranding, for instance, right? Where again, they have a tentative release cycle, they release games and they call it a day. How many upcoming Xbox releases do you fucking hear of? If Sony puts out big billboards for games like Spider-Man 2, Microsoft will never advertise anything like Hellblade 2, for instance, which comes out the 21st of this month, without anything so much more so than a tweet. You probably...
How do you know Hellblade 2 came out the 21st of this month? You mean to tell me Microsoft didn't promote that at all? Damn, Microsoft! Damn, Microsoft! Damn, your marketing is crap! Your marketing is crap! You're not promoting your games whatsoever! You're just going off Game Pass hoping it does well! Damn! Damn, no promotion for Hellblade 2! Besides a simple tweet that got buried in a sea of tweets. I'll agree. Mutahar, Sony does promote their games all equally. Same with Nintendo. So when Nintendo releases a game, they'll promote that game as equally as say they promote a Pokemon game, or say a Mario game, or say an Animal Crossing game. That they promote them all equally. And same with Sony. Same with promote God of War as equally as say Horizon and stuff like that. They promote them all equally. Microsoft isn't promoting their games at all. I thought Hellblade 2 came out later in the year. I had no idea it came out this month in a few weeks. That is a bad stinker by Microsoft. That's because I was looking forward to Hellblade 2, but I had no idea it released this month. Microsoft, get your marketing together.
Haven't even seen actual ads on YouTube of this game. It is 2 weeks out, and it almost feels like this would have slipped by. The only reason I know about this is because at the back of my head, something asked me, hey Muda, what about that new Hellblade game you saw around the beginning of the Xbox life cycle? Maybe you should Google that up. It was by actual happenstance that I decided to look this game up. It wasn't being advertised or marketed, if anything. So if this game fails to succeed, I would be hard-pressed if Microsoft would go out and say, gamers just aren't interested in this kind of shit. They literally do such a bad job of promoting their own video games that people have to look through and basically be Mandela affected and go through the entire process to figure out if this game is actually coming out, did it come out or whatnot, before they finally have to look up release dates for themselves. their competitors will blow your face out with upcoming games and advertisements for them. Microsoft, I feel like they do absolutely nothing. And it's not just the games that are releasing that are a little bit on the indie side. Microsoft does an absolutely poor job with their actual mainline AAA games. I'm going to keep going back to Halo Infinite as an example. Right now, after a slew of updates, Halo Infinite is a somewhat decent game. But when that game initially released, Microsoft dropped the ball by releasing an unfinished title. It was a game that dropped with its multiplayer incomplete, by the way, too. You know, if you look into the past with Microsoft releases, when they dropped games like Halo Reach, there were huge promotional campaigns for it. The game dropped in a completed state. You had a game that had a campaign, a game that had its firefight mode, the multiplayer mode, custom games, Forge. All 5 of these could be entire games in of themselves. And now that they release games like Halo Infinite, one of their biggest releases ever on the most powerful systems, it's a game that lacks split screen on launch, a campaign that isn't accessible at launch, no firefight mode from my understanding to this day, which is absolutely mind-boggling when it's a huge core feature of actual Halo games, no Forge on release, and the custom games option was incredibly limited. And the multiplayer that was there was relegated to a few game modes versus the slew of game modes that was introduced in Halo 3 and Halo Reach and even Halo 4. So again, their big landmark title, they dropped the ball on. And let's not even start talking about games like Gears of War that have pretty much remained anonymous.
Yeah, Halo Infinite dropped the ball for Microsoft. Halo Infinite dropped the ball. I remember playing that online at launch, and even some of the key features that are there in other Halo games just weren't there. Like, say, Forge, Firefight, stuff like that. And even, like I said, the campaign just even wasn't accessible at launch. They released the online before they released the campaign, and the online still is incomplete. It's like, that game just struggled. Microsoft just struggled to release a good Halo game. I won't say it was really because of 343 Studio. 343 Studio was working their best what Microsoft gave them, but the executives just didn't know what to do with that game. They were like, "Oh, we'll patch this in. We'll release this here. Release this here. Release this here," and they just dropped a big bomb stinker with that game.
As far as this entire generation has gone on. Now, one individual known as Brad Hilderberg, who was apparently an ex-Microsoft EA guy, apparently had started talking about why some of those Bethesda studios had been shut down. So he says there are 2 reasons why all those Bethesda studios closed, and neither of them have anything to do with Bethesda directly. Game Pass and Activision. The biggest paradox with Game Pass is that basically every game that launches on the service badly misses its sales goal. Makes sense though. Why pay full price to buy a game when you can play it for free as part of your subscription? This I absolutely agree with. A lot of these big games that come out and the independent stuff like Hi-Fi Rush, the sales numbers are always badly misfigured. Because who in most cases is going to buy an entire game versus just buy the subscription service and play games instead? I can't actually remember the last time I personally have actually bought an actual Xbox game. Since they don't even care about the physical releases anymore, I don't even feel the need to go out and buy a disc or digitally purchase these games, especially when I can pay less money and get access to playing some of these mediocre titles for, again, a fraction of the cost. Games like Starfield, which I guess are billed as some of the biggest Xbox single-player releases, when effectively they're just Fallout 4 in space, is a game that I don't believe I should have paid full price for. I should have just played this on the subscription service and called it a day. It's a game that I haven't even finished in that capacity. But going back to this post, this is accounted for somewhat by attributing portions of revenue to top-performing Game Pass games every month. But there are factors working against games, namely the fact that most games don't stay at the top of the chart for more than a month or 2, and also that Game Pass growth has stagnated. So games like Hi-Fi Rush, which is incredible mind you, get a very small bump in revenue from being the hot Game Pass game for a month. Then it falls off a cliff when everyone moves on to the next thing. Poor Redfall had it even worse since it launched so rough. It never had a chance. The system was fine for a while when Game Pass was growing like gangbusters, but now it's slowed down and the amount of revenue it's attributing to games isn't keeping up with the budgets to make them. And this is actually true as well. The amount of growth that some of these actual gaming subscriptions, and it's not just Game Pass, it's PlayStation Now as well, have seen a growth of about 1% at this point, as of recently. So it's not
Yep.
exactly growing to the point that it used to be. And that
Yep. A lot of people don't have the money. The economy is shit. They just don't have the money. They have to cut money there, cut money there. They can't afford, say, Game Pass or stuff like that. There's been times, like right now, I don't have Game Pass. I can afford Game Pass for my last subscription fee. So, yeah, there's a lot of times where you're just like, oh, well, I can't afford Game Pass. I gotta afford other bills this month. So let me cut my Game Pass. And yeah, it's just cut into games like Hi-Fi Rush, doing well, stuff like that. Whereas with Sony, at least they promote games on their platform, and their games will do well. They will sell well. It all comes back to that advertising. Like that's pretty much the reason the Wii U didn't do well. The Wii U, Nintendo didn't advertise as a new console. I know people still nowadays that don't know the Wii U was Nintendo's console after after the Wii. So it all goes back to that advertisement and all that marketing and all that. Because that's the field I'm in now. I'm in marketing for my new job. And marketing is a key role in a game or something doing well. You gotta market it, input the data, get the information out there in order for it to do well. If you don't market it well, it's not gonna do well at all. It's gonna hit the fan and fall flat. So yeah.
is not good. It means that the money that they are making and the growth of it and the expectation that that money will pay back the development cost for some of these games is becoming a house of cards that's slowly on its way out. So again, all of that wouldn't have mattered 3 or 4 years ago because back then Xbox was basically a rounding error on Microsoft's books. The division made some money, but more importantly, it didn't cost that much, and other parts of the business easily covered the gap. Then Xbox went on a buying spree and spent a lot of money on Bethesda, but orders of magnitude more on Activision. Now the Eye of Sauron has turned, and Xbox is expected to make back that $70 billion, or at least cut expenses to the bone while they try. And that brings us back to Game Pass. So far, the big bets on driving new subscriptions, Redfield, Starfield, haven't spurred near enough growth, and there's not much on the horizon that is likely to restart the momentum. The best bet is Call of Duty. But do you really risk the guaranteed sales revenue that franchise brings by putting it on Game Pass on day one and potentially lose massive sales? I don't know what the plans are, but either you put it on Game Pass and lose money, or you don't and the subscribers revolt because they think that's what they signed up for. COD will be fine though, as well as the other mega studios with huge IPs. But you're seeing the impact. All the smaller studios really making interesting games are going to fall away, simply because as good as games like Hi-Fi Rush are, they're never going to somehow make enough money to make up the $70 billion hole that Xbox now has to dig out of itself. And that is by far one of the best analyses in this situation. It's not necessarily
See, that is dumb. Microsoft should have never went on that buying spree. Because, right, like you said, they were a rounding error before where they weren't the big key money making factor for Microsoft. Microsoft was making more money off their Windows operation system, Office, stuff like that. They're making more money off that. Whereas still all of a sudden, Microsoft, Xbox goes on this big buying spree of a bunch of studios like Bethesda and Activision, and now it's hurting them where they have to shut down these smaller studios because they're never going to make up the money that they have the hole in for what they created when they bought these studios. So now it's like, oh, now we created a hole that can't be filled, and yeah, but the only way is to cut the meat of the smaller studios. So it's like, yeah, Microsoft just should have never did that. They should have never bought these smaller studios. They should have just left them. They should, honestly, like I said, honestly, I don't think Microsoft should have bought Activision. Activision. I think they like Activision be Activision Blizzard, be their own little company, their own little third party company. And now that they bought them, it's created this hole. It's created this hole that a lot of smaller studios are going to have to feel the effect of. And it just sucks because Microsoft, this would have never happened if they would have never opened up that hole, because Game Pass, those games just aren't going to do well on Game Pass, because they'll be well for about a month, but they'll fall off a cliff afterwards and not have to shut down the studio. So, Microsoft just that was a dumb decision.
The big games that are going to be paying for it. Look, Call of Duty will always survive. The thing about putting Call of Duty on a subscription service is ultimately a bad thing for business. Why make it where a game franchise that actually makes billions of dollars a year at this point, why actually take away a guaranteed source of income? It's kind of like putting Grand Theft Auto on a subscription service. Why put Grand Theft Auto 5 on a subscription service when in reality Grand Theft Auto 5 still to this day makes a lot of sales? It's one of the reasons why live service gaming is this weird dragon that companies keep on trying to chase. I feel like with many big Microsoft games, especially games that have a multiplayer component, Microsoft is trying to find the next big actual live service game. And if you think about the industry like this, live service games are successful, at least the ones that are mostly played in the top 10. If you look at some of the top 10 most online played games, they are not new games. They're games like Fortnite, which have been out for years. They're games like Rainbow Six Siege, which have been out for years. They're games like Grand Theft Auto 5 that actually have no competition. And while game companies try to chase that one game that can net $1 billion a year, the only thing, for example, that will kill Grand Theft Auto 5 is Grand Theft Auto 6. And again, it's kind of a shame when companies look at those metrics and think, let's just make the next big live service game. Because here's the thing, for every one successful Grand Theft Auto 5 live service, there are at least 30 failures to look at in the industry. And that's something that Microsoft and nobody else is truly figuring out. We literally just have Suicide Squad with a $200 million hole in Warner Brothers' pockets. It's insanity. Now, the only people that are actually paying for this are those smaller developers. Look, I don't give a shit.
Yep. Only ones paying for it are the smaller developers. It's like it's like I say, like these games that honestly are live service, that are one-offs, like Grand Theft Auto, Fortnite, and all that. There are do good just because they have that service that's stood the test of time, that people still play to this day, that people still love, because they have that service that's made a brand for themselves. That's a one-off. And they try to face this one-off with other games. I mean, well, maybe we do this like this. You don't understand that that's a one-off game. That's a 1%er game. That's a game with a one-in-a-lifetime type of live server games as a service game. And then they chase this, and then it just fails. Like, even, I'll give you an example. Helldivers 2 is Tony could have just let that be their one-off games as a service game that did exceptionally well. But, oh, Callie's throwing up. But then it failed. And Sony just, then they failed and took all that goodwill away, which destroyed it as a service, destroyed the service for it. So yeah, that's the thing you understand. These one-off games are something that doesn't replicate over and over again. It's something that can only be happen in certain circumstances that make them successful. I mean, like you said, the only thing that will kill Grand Theft Auto 5 is Grand Theft Auto 6. Now, I better dare say that won't really kill Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 still has its long service that people will still play even into Grand Theft Auto 6. So, yeah. So yeah. Yeah, like Call of Duty. I'll admit, I don't like Call of Duty anymore. I'll admit, a lot of people don't like, but it's not going to deny that Call of Duty is still one of the biggest casual first-person shooters played out there. There's still people that think, oh, if I'm going to play a first-person shooter, I'm going to play Call of Duty. They know Call of Duty is brand recognition. It has brand recognition where, like, if I'm going to play a first-person shooter, I'm going to play Call of Duty. So, yeah, it still has brand recognition. So, yeah, put it on Game Pass, just hurt it, where you can make a much more money not putting on the service, people will still buy it. So, yeah.
about Halo at this point, but I do give a shit about Ghostwire Tokyo. And I was really looking forward to a Ghostwire Tokyo 2 at some point in my gaming life. But because of Microsoft's poor business decisions and the fact that they just like to gobble up companies and literally do nothing with them, instead shut them down when that's how their business is going, is ultimately a net negative for gamers. Look, people have always said, Muda, is this going to be a video game crash? I really do believe a video game crash will come, but for a very specific AAA market of games that have highly bloated budgets and games that are trying to chase that weird live service dragon. Look, as bad as gaming appears on the surface and in the news, there is ultimately a silver lining to a lot of this. There are a lot of games that are successful that actually make gangbuster levels of cash. You've got games like System Shock, that the remake alone is one of the best games that I've played. Even on Steam, the amount of indie offerings is wild. I recently started playing a game called Mullet Jack, which is just this roguelike first-person shooter. It was made by a few people, if not just one person, and it's a game that I feel can make a lot of money back if people just give this a chance and give it a try. Games like V Rising come out literally today. Games like Hades 2 in early access that are still killing it right now, positively reviewed, actually making money. It really feels like if you're a game publisher.
Yeah, V Rising. That's what I was saying, V Rising, because it's no longer in early access. But yeah, V Rising, games like that actually show goodwill from indie companies that are making a big boom. Indie companies are making a big boom in the gaming industry and making it way better than some of the bigger AAA companies. I mean, look at Power World. Power World released in early access and released really, really well and stuff like that. Whereas companies like Nintendo, where their mainline Pokemon game release a stinker and don't do anything with it. So we're gonna see this shift towards the indie companies making the games and stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of that with a lot of indie companies where they're making the bigger games than some of the bigger AAA companies and stuff like that. Not saying AAA games are all dead, because there's still some good AAA games, but they aren't as good as what they used to be. A lot of the good games nowadays are come from indie companies. Indie companies are making a lot of more bangers nowadays than AAA. So yeah, we're seeing that shift a lot.
Public or game developer, never ever sell your team for financial security at any of these big companies. Because if the largest company on the planet, Microsoft, can't prop up the things that they've bought, then that's just a shame to not just them, but the livelihoods of the people that they brought onto their company. That is a fucking shame, and it's something that I honestly am really offended of that Microsoft started to do. Look, I want Xbox to succeed, not because I have a history with them, but because competition is important. I don't want one of the largest sectors, one of the biggest pillars of gaming to fall because of some of the poorest decision making at Microsoft and some of the poor business handling of people like Phil Spencer, who's somebody I believe is a lying sack of shit. I don't believe anything Phil Spencer says is actually for the good of gamers. I think that he likes to yap a whole lot, make parasocial relationships, but when it comes to topics like game preservation, making sure that gamers are actually satiated and gamers are actually getting the games that they want from the companies Microsoft has acquired, I don't believe he has good intentions at heart. I think he is by far one of the fucking worst businessmen to exist in gaming and one of the worst people, one of the worst influences on the Xbox brand. But yeah, this is where Xbox is, and there's a whole lot to talk about. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right here. If you like what you saw, please.
Yeah, I agree. Microsoft's in the worst place for the gaming industry. Microsoft's in a real bad place for the gaming industry, where they're just not. They're just releasing things and trying to throw things at the wall and hope it sticks. And if it doesn't stick, then it goes out the door. So yeah. So yeah, right now the gaming industry itself is in a bad place. It's in a really bad place. Hopefully, like I said, we're looking at a lot of shift towards indies, and indies are really doing well. Like I know another indie game that did really well is that one game Buckshot. Buckshot did really, really well. I saw a lot of people playing that on Twitch. Which makes be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch to join the Shao Dynasty today.